Again, my name is Daryl McCrary. I'm the acting special agent in charge here in Detroit Field Division for ATF. I want to talk to you about an event that occurred September 20th, 2011 down in Monroe, Michigan. During that evening, or actually that day, Mr. Chappell and his sons were traveling to a scheduled football practice that was interrupted when an individual or individuals detonated an explosive that was situated under the vehicle that Mr. Chapman and his children were driving in. According to our ATF profiler out of Quantico, Virginia, a person or persons would have had to have held such a grievance towards Mr. Chappell that they were willing to kill him and his innocent children. As well with this command detonation device, which also has shrapnel to increase its lethality. This is what supports our theory of that case. An individual that would engage in such target-specific extreme violence often has certain traits, and I'm going to talk to you about some of those traits that were built up during the criminal profile. This would be an individual or individuals who seek excessive revenge for perceived grievances. They're the type that have the motto of I don't get mad, I get even. As well, an individual who possesses such anger traits that would be noted by the people that are around him, and often his family members or friends would probably suffer from verbal, emotional, and physical abuse due to the volatility of the person's temper. This also, anger may cloud the person's thinking. It may be a person that is always blaming others for their mistakes or shortcomings, and one who's not willing to take responsibility for his own actions. These individuals or individual may have a certain self-centeredness. They may think that it's all about them, and they may display a degree of callousness towards the lack of concern towards the rights of others. They may also be engaged in other criminal activities such as fraud, property crimes, and other assaults. Again, this individual would have had to have had a private workplace where they assembled, constructed, and stored the device. And the skills that they would have had to put the device together may have been something that they developed either through their job or through a hobby. We'd like to think that there's someone out there in the public that has information about this device. They may not have known what its intended use was for, or they may have. In any event, they may have information that's key to bringing justice to Mr. Chappell and his family. If anyone out there in the public does have information specific to this device, we'd ask that they contact ATF at our 1-800 or 188-ATF-BOMB number, 188-ATF-BOMB, or contact our investigators out of the Ann Arbor field office at 1-734-887-0060. That's 1-734-887-0060. As well, remember there's a $20,000 reward for anybody that has any information that will lead to the arrest and conviction of the individuals that were a part of this scheme. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to our EEO, Michael Eggleston. He'll talk specifically about some of the technical aspects of the device. Mike.
Good afternoon. As was introduced, my name is Michael Eggleston. I'm an explosive enforcement officer with ATF, and as part of those duties, it's my responsibility to, as in this case, reconstruct the device for purposes of prosecution, for purposes of identification of the component parts involved. And that's what's been done in this case. As stated before, this is what is considered either a command-initiated or remote control device. Basically everything is entailed here. You have the pipe bomb, you have all the electronic components. The way this is set up is it can be used with a transmitter. The receiver is part of the device itself. Once the device was placed on the vehicle, this particular device is unique in the sense that it gave the bomber, in this case, the ultimate control over not only the device itself, but the victims as well. They had the precise time to activate this. It was completely within their control. And the way this was designed is once both of these units are working in conjunction with one another, as the servo switch moves, it makes connection and it fires the device. Obviously, in place of the buzzer in this, you would actually have an explosion.
Good afternoon. My name is Eric Chappell, and just a few comments for today. Number one, do want to express our gratitude for all the continued effort that the members of the ATF are putting into this investigation. We know that they're working hard, and we appreciate everything that they've done and all the time that they've spent on this. I just have to reiterate that obviously there's people out there that know something. Even if it's something that they may consider to be more of a minuscule item or a small fact, we would just encourage you to please come forward and provide that information to the members of the ATF so they can move forward with ultimately bringing this matter to a conclusion. It's obviously one thing to have somebody target me, but another to have it targeted to my kids. And we know there's people out there, so please come forward and let us bring this to conclusion. Thank
you. Questions?
Let me ask Mr. Chappell, can you tell us about your boys, how they're doing right now?
They're doing great. Both are playing football, and they've been really strong and courageous, and we're very proud of how they have advanced throughout this. So they're doing awesome. So.
And how old are they now?
Grant is 15, and Cole is 13 years old. Grant is a sophomore, and Cole is an 8th grader at a school. So.
And Mr. Chappell, how are you doing with this still unresolved?
We're thankful we get to see them every day, and we're thankful that we get to watch them do things like play sports, etc. So yes, we're looking forward to having this concluded, but we recognize it could have been a whole lot worse than what it was relative to the ultimate consequences to them. They had some serious injuries, but it was pretty interesting after the Boston Marathon bombing to see some of the carnage that happened as a result of that bomb. And we really truly felt so fortunate throughout this, but after that you realize how lucky we are that we have our limbs and we have them with us. So we're hanging in there. So.
Mr. Chappell, I ran into you last year in the federal courthouse, and you told me that you believe that you think you know who did this. Is that still your belief?
I don't want to answer any questions that might impact an ongoing criminal investigation. So.
Well, can I steer that toward the agents here? Are you any closer to a suspect or suspect? Agent McCurry, a lot of the things that we've heard this afternoon were said last year. Maybe you can address how close you are to a suspect and just how much momentum you may or may not have in terms of solving this.
Well, we do have persons of interest. I'd like to say that these types of investigations, especially one as sophisticated as what this device belies, are very complex investigations. They're a puzzle of sorts. And although we have a lot of the pieces of the puzzle, we still need to perfect a criminal case that's going to bring this individual or individuals to justice. And so that's why we are imploring the public's help in this, to provide us with any additional information that would prove successful at ultimately identifying that person or persons that are involved with this. Again, these are long-term investigations, unfortunately, due to the technical nature of the investigations, due to the fact that this person, it's a command-detonated device. He probably detonated the device, it's out there for a few minutes, and left. And so the attention is then on the victims and maybe not so much on this person. So we come back on this anniversary to see if we can jog the memories of someone out there and gather that additional piece of information to perfect that successful criminal investigation.
Any idea where this device was, where Mr. Chappell's car was parked when this device was placed on his vehicle, and the proximity the person with the detonator device would have had to have been in order to cause the explosion?
As far as where it was parked, that the evidence really doesn't give us an idea of specifically where it was parked.
But we don't know where it was placed on his vehicle.
It was underneath the passenger side, right underneath that passenger front seat. As far as distance away, just for accuracy, working within the frequencies and the parameters of this type of device, you're looking at around no more than half a mile. So they would, and that's line of sight. So whoever activated this would have been able to see the results of the bomb.
And know that the children were inside.
And know that the children were inside, yes, that is correct.
Can you kind of just hold up each of those devices and just briefly explain again, like, what they are?
This is a transmitter. It is basically what sends out the signal. Normally this is found in a remote control car, airplane, boat, something of that nature. It's designed to steer it. You can adjust the amount that the wheels turn. You can adjust frontwards, backwards, things like that. And what it is talking to, for lack of a better term, when it sends out the signal, is the receiver component. These two are linked through a frequency, and what it is guiding is the servo motor. And it is basically moving the arms on the servo motor. In this case, the way it was set up was when this servo motor moved in a certain direction, it makes contact with the way that the device was designed. And again, instead of the buzz, you're going to hear an explosion.
What level of skill do you think it took to make that?
With as much as on the internet and that you can get just by querying these type of systems, it's not an overly sophisticated device, but you do have to have a fairly good knowledge of electricity, how to make things work, because you're taking a system that was designed to be placed into a motor vehicle, remote control vehicle of some nature, and you're converting it into basically what is a weapon.
And what was inside the pipe bomb to make the shrapnel and all that to cause the injuries?
Well, the main component, explosive component, was a double-base smokeless powder, and then mixed in with that was ball bearings as well as some small arms ammunition. So, you know, when this was designed, it was designed for the specific purpose of, you know, at very minimum, destroying property, but the victims in this case were extremely lucky. I mean, this has every potential in the world to cause death. That's the way it was designed.
If somebody could go to the if somebody could go to the microphone and talk about, do they think that they were watching Mr. Chappell and then knew when to actually detonate it, or what?
The way these devices are designed, obviously, you know, in referencing before, this is line of sight. So this goes beyond just a normal type attack. Obviously, they would have to know the victim's schedule to a certain extent. They would have to know where he would be at a certain time, who he would have in the vehicle with him, things along those lines. And, you know, it doesn't take a lot. Most of us are creatures of habit. We get up at the same time, we stop at the same coffee shops, different things of that nature. So it wouldn't take a long time, but it is a concerted effort to set and follow someone, to know where they would be at any given time during the day, where the bomber would have access to the vehicle, that they could move about without being detected, as well as where they could be to have that true line of sight in order to activate this device.
And you mentioned that the nature of this device was such that at the minimum and at most. Can you kind of go over that again in terms of?
You know, maximum range on this is about 104 meters, so you're right in that half-mile window. And like I said, that's line of sight. So if I'm having to conceal myself because of the roadway or the surroundings in behind or under something, you're reducing that down even further. say the main thing that makes this unique is you have someone who has designed a weapon and a method of attack that gives them a specific control over not only the device itself, but control over the victim as well. Because they are literally holding their life in their hands and deciding when it is time to attack.
And at the minimum in terms of how badly you could injure someone, I mean, what were the possibilities here?
You know, the way this is designed with the additional shrapnel, you know, from my experience in doing this for a number of years, this was designed with a specific purpose in killing someone.
Was there anything to where that was placed on the vehicle that would cause more of an explosion, if you will?
Well, obviously, if you get it near a fuel source or you get it in an area where you're going to have something added to that, you're going to enhance that. But in and of itself, it's an extremely dangerous weapon. Actually, placing it under the vehicle probably gave a little bit of buffer. The only thing that happens when you place it under the vehicle is now not only do you have the materials of the device itself, which in this case is a heavy case pipe, but now you've added shrapnel to that to make it even more deadly, and now we're adding all of the pieces and metal and shearing that, as the explosion occurs, is driving that up into the bottom of the vehicle. So, you know, whereas in one way it kind of gave a little bit of protection, in another you're just creating a bigger and bigger bomb as you move along.
When you recovered, you know, ball bearings or ammunition or whatever was inside there, were you able to trace it? Is there, you know, anything there that can help or might, you know?
Unfortunately, it's not CSI. I mean, I know you guys know that. You know, and unfortunately, a lot of that stuff, even if you can trace it back, it's at the end of the day, it's generic in nature. It's, you know, when you talk about reloading rounds or, you know, bullet tips, again, they're very, very generic. Unless they travel through some type of firearm, there's very little markings on them. And in this case, you add that to the fact that they were involved in an explosion. It changes not only their physical state, but sometimes it changes their chemical state. So, again, it's very much like was alluded to before. It is a big, big puzzle, and that's why, like this, in this case, it's taken a while to get all those puzzle pieces back somewhat together. And this, and I'll reiterate this, this is based on the evidence. This is a mock-up. I mean, this is looking at every possible scenario. This is, you know, a way that this could function. Can I stand here and say that this is identical? Absolutely not. But this is a basic representative, given all of the evidence of the most, you know, probable idea.
Can you tell, are you able to use that while moving? And my question is, can you tell this person or persons, they've been following them in the car, or do they have to be standing like somewhere along the road?
And when you say moving, meaning can I
The
be
person
moving in a
holding
vehicle with
Yeah.
this? Absolutely.
They could have been following, or they could have been stationary
Now,
somewhere.
the more, even as much as a windshield, you're decreasing your distance and your frequency. And then when you also add in all of the electronics in your vehicle and all of the electronics that we carry on our body, you're adding in factors that could interfere with this. Because this is basically an antenna. It's sitting out there waiting for a signal. And this is sending that signal. So as long as you're in a position where those two signals are going to meet and it'll function that device, then you can be virtually anywhere. I can be in a house as long as I can see it. But the most probable scenario is out in the open where you know that you're going to get a good signal continuity, but it could be done in a vehicle.
About a year and a half ago in the same room, they were talking about these toy cars. I think Electrics was the name of it. Is that still the belief that we should be focused on that?
That is the brand based on the physical evidence that we are looking at. Now the components, the electronic components, were able to be traced back to that particular brand.
And is there a belief, this was expressed at the same news conference Roger was referring to, is there a belief that someone may have unwittingly helped this individual?
That's a possibility, and you know that is one of the main purposes of this type of a conference is if somebody's out there and they're watching this or they see this and it you know everything comes together and they realize that they've built something or made something with having no intention of it ever being used against a person. But they recognize the components or they recognize the parts. That's the person that we're really hoping comes forward.
Well, 2 years later, what do you think their reluctance, I guess, would have been to not step forward in these last 2 years, if there is someone out there?
You know, I couldn't pretend to answer for, you know, what someone's thinking or feeling. I mean, you know, they may not know until today the specificity of the individual components, and it may click.
Question for Mr. Chappell. It's been 2 years, do you still feel like your life is at risk?
We're cautious. We've remained as cautious as we were afterwards today.
What is your message to the person who did this and to anybody who might know anything about it?
Now, the message just remains, you know, please come forward. You know, there's people out there that, you know, have the information. There's probably multiple people out there that have the information, that have the ability to come forward and, you know, provide some piece of data or evidence that, you know, may answer some of the questions that remain open at this time. So, you know, we're just going to continue to encourage them to do that. You know, think about the people that were harmed. It wasn't just me. Someone obviously had a grievance against me and decided to act, but on top of acting, they threw 2 innocent kids. And you know, we just can't tolerate that, ever.
Any suspected motive?
And again, I think that probably gets to the point of not wanting to comment on anything that would involve the ongoing investigation. Yeah.
We're going to tell the guys here, we don't want to get into things, still ongoing investigation, still very active. So we're going to be very careful on what we talk about in this investigation. So,
Just a couple of technical questions. To put that in the car, how much access, how much time would you need to be able to put that device where they wanted to do it?
It does have a little bit of weight to it. You know, and once it's fully built up with some powder and everything, depending on how much is in there, how much shrapnel is in there, you're probably in the 4 to 5 pound range. So it's not the easiest task, but it's not the most difficult either. You know, if you've ever been up underneath the vehicle, there's a lot of crevices in there. There's a lot of places up against the frame where it could set. There's a lot of places where something of that size, even though here it looks large, can be wedged in. I mean, you're talking a matter of minutes at the, you know, the longest that someone, if they knew where the vehicle would be, knew what kind of access they had to it, a matter of minutes, you could have it up under there.
And if you could clarify, I think at one point you talked about a range of 100 meters. I thought you also said a half mile. Did you mean 1,000 meters? Or what, again, is the maximum range to control that?
You're looking at about half a mile at most, and that's line of sight.
Do you think this was put on his vehicle at night?
Again, it could have been. It could have been in broad daylight, depending on the access to the vehicle. I mean, again, you're talking about something where you could walk along beside it, drop down, you know, roll under, depending on how big the person is, and get it under there in a matter of minutes. It would have necessarily had to been at night.
And it could have been on there for an hour, or it could have been under there for a day.
Exactly. Once this is placed, the only limitation that the bomber has at that point is the battery life of the unit itself.
And is it a rechargeable unit? Is that what it is?
This particular one is, yes. The batteries are rechargeable. The transmitter itself runs on AA batteries. They can be either, you know, regular or rechargeable. The unit for the receiver itself and that powers the vehicle is a rechargeable unit.
So the item that was on the actual bomb itself was a rechargeable battery?
Correct.
Anything else? Okay, thank you for coming.